All right, good morning and welcome back to another episode of Morning Mumbles with Donnie DD214. It's been about 3 days since I recorded. I think on Thursday or Friday, but it was like really short and I didn't think it was prevalent. So I'll do another video. It was going to be about imagining your life is a movie, but we'll do that scenario later. And if you wonder what the whining is outside my door, I have two German Shepherds and they want to come in, but I know that I'm going to try to make a serious podcast today. So I've been wanting to make this one for a while. This is probably the most important one that I have done and may do. Kind of just tell you how I got to this point with this beard and where I'm at today with over the last 3 years of my life. Give you a quick rundown. This episode is going to be about why I separated from the military, voluntarily separated after 12 years. So a quick rundown. Had a son at 20. Had recently dropped out of school, college for mechanical engineering in Indiana. Just wasn't for me at the time. Had some random jobs, worked on Indy cars for about 4 years maybe. Doing body work. That was fun. Just wasn't really stable, and I wasn't, I was young, so I was making mistakes of myself, showing up late, this and that. And then I found a pretty good job. I was working at a warehouse, third shift though, so it was kind of kicking my ass. I had a really good friend who is still currently in, and he joined at 18, and he told me I was almost 25. He had told me for years, he had said, the Air Force is awesome, super easy, you love it, and you do really well. You could go back to school, all that stuff. So I was 24 and I made the decision to join the Air Force. I'd looked at it years before when I was like 19 or 20 and I was about to have a son, and just wasn't the right time for me at that moment in life. I wasn't prepared, and so at almost 25, 24, I signed. And it took me, I think, about 6 months to go. So I left for the Air Force in late 2009. Anyways, years passed. 12 years, great. 2 deployments, 4 duty locations. I had just gotten back from the Middle East deployment. A deployment in the Middle East for 8 months when COVID had rolled out, or COVID came out while I was deployed. So we get the lockdown on base. We can't do this. We can't do that anymore. They closed our fast food down. I know that's kind of like a silly thing to complain about, but we also had to we didn't even have face masks when it started. So they expected us to make our own, which was kind of silly. So we ended up to go get our food, we had to make our own masks out of socks and things like that. We got donated. So it was really weird time. That's why we got stuck there for 8 months. It was only supposed to be a 6-month deployment. So anyways, I was deployed with one of my airmen, and we kind of saw it from the beginning. We were just like, okay, COVID was created in a wet market. Just didn't make sense. So I'm not going to go super down conspiracy road today, but we'll just say that I was skeptical from the beginning. We all started getting sick. Well, my roommate at the time on deployment got really sick. This was early 2020. So right when it had dropped, we were in the Middle East again, and I think that COVID was already spreading over there. But me and one of my coworkers were just like, something's off with this. Anyways, get back, the whole face mask thing is really prevalent in the military, and we're just like, at work, you're wearing face masks all day. This kind of seems silly. Luckily, I was in Idaho, so when I would get off work, I'm not wearing face masks. It's actually proven that they didn't really stop anything due to the size of the virus and the actual micron filtration of the masks. In fact, they lower your oxygen, your ability to exhale your carbon dioxide, as well as getting clean, fresh air. So it was actually kind of a weird thing in life. If you look back, the 6-foot thing, 6 foot of separation was actually bullshit too. The masks, in fact, besides N95s, were shown to be bullshit too. And, it was one of those things. It was kind of silly. It was like living in the Twilight Zone, and everyone knows that. Looking back now, I pretty much saw it from the beginning. Anyway, so why did I voluntarily separate from the Air Force? It was the vaccine. So around, I think it was 2021. Yeah, it was mid to late 2021. They started, early 2021, I think the vaccines came out. And at the time, there were EUA, so emergency use authorized. I think that's what it stands for. And so looking back, you realize that EUAs, they can't force you in the military or anywhere to take an EUA vaccine. And one of the things that really threw me off was that there was no testing done on it, like very little testing. And, the Pfizer documents have shown recently and even over the last couple of years that there was literally no testing done on that thing. And over half the population got it. And so at the time, the EUA looked like, the military looked like it was going to hold off. Like it couldn't force you to take it. But the administration at the time said, this is not, they came out with one they said was not EUA authorized. It was going to be fully tested, fully vetted. It wasn't EUA. It was called Comirnaty is what they named it or whatever. But it turned out to be the same damn thing. So around that time, I was holding out. I'm like, I've gotten every other shot the military's ever given me, measles, mumps, rubella, blah, 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 diphtheria, DTP, I think is what it's called. I think I'd just gotten the anthrax shot or whatever the hell it was to go to the Middle East. Probably my second or third time, I'm not sure. But every other shot I had never questioned. It was during that deployment that kind of opened my eyes back up. I was like, what the hell are we doing to our bodies? What are we doing as a society? It just kind of seemed really off to me. And so I had held off to not get the shot. It wasn't mandatory at the time, so I was like, okay, cool, I'm not gonna do it. But later in that year, it started getting pushed really, really hard. 2021. It was like during the summer time frame, around September, October. They said, okay, it's authorized. You guys are all getting the shot, or you can file a religious exemption, or you can get essentially kicked out, or you can get an Article 15 paperwork, all that stuff. So I was like, nah, I'm gonna hold off. This is really crazy. This whole situation actually brought me back to God. And like I said, this is definitely the hardest podcast I've ever done. And I didn't feel comfortable for 3 years, and I still don't know that I feel 100% comfortable talking to strangers about this, but a lot of people have came out, and I think I've briefly talked about it in a couple of my podcasts. But back to the story. So around that time frame, I started going back to church, and I was like, it was like the first time I went back. It was amazing. It was like the pastor was like literally talking to me. You're going through rough times, and God has your back. Essentially, God will carry you. When you see that picture they used to have, it was like during the hard times, your life is like a journey, and during the hard times, you only see one footprint, and that was God carrying you. Well, at that time, that was God carrying me. So they call us. This is the first scenario, one of the first scenarios, and I didn't have this planned out. I just kind of wing it like I do everything. So they had a town hall, which is where they brought essentially everyone on base into the base theater. Everyone that had not gotten the shot was called to go to the base theater, and I think this was around the September 2021 time frame. And they had a pastor come talk to us, or a chaplain. They had JAG, which is base legal, and then they had doctors come talk to us. And so the first person to talk was the JAG, and the JAG was an 04 major, and basically said that either get the shot or we are going to do everything in our power to give you Article 15s and get you kicked out. He essentially likened it to the last person in World War II, I think it was World War II or World War I, it might have been World War I, that was given a direct order to go to the front line with his weapon and obviously fight. And the person said no. So that person was shot at a firing squad. And so that's what he likened it to. And so me at the time, and he's 6. I'd been in 12 years, and I'm like, really? You're just gonna threaten us? Like, I've had a great career. Most of these people in here have had a great career. Most of us are not troublemakers. We're literally just don't think this is safe. This is, my body, my choice. That's not what I was going at necessarily, but I guess it kind of was, because, this is new mRNA technology, which is essentially gene editing or gene therapy, in which the current vaccine is not like the old standard vaccines where they would inject a weakened flu virus in you, or, this was essentially telling your DNA, your mRNA, messenger ribonucleic acid to create spike proteins, which is only one aspect of the COVID-19 virus. So it kind of seemed super off to me. And again, this thing just came out like 6 months ago, push it to market. Okay. What is the efficacy and what is the safety of this? I don't know. So there we are, getting essentially threatened for our careers, over this vaccine. And it was just blowing my mind, Again, I couldn't even believe this was really happening. So then, the chaplains come up and say, if you have a strongly held belief, this is a religious exemption portion you can do. Next comes up the doctors, some captains. I think they're all captains, maybe 1 or 2 captains. And they come up and they start talking, and they're giving us all the bullshit. So there are like 100 of us in there. And we all start asking questions. And the questions are essentially not being answered. They're just, being pushed off. Women are asking, just had a baby. Some of the women had just had babies, and they're like, well, do I get an exemption because I'm breastfeeding and I don't know what'll happen to my kids? And so, well, yeah, you can get a 3-month or whatever the exemption was at the time. And, we're all just asking questions. Where is this data coming from? Where is, blah, 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 blah. And essentially, I feel that we were not given valid data. So, within the next couple of weeks, they give you the option to go through the religious exemption. So I decided to do the religious exemption. And let's just say that none of the branches had really had that ironed out yet. So, but, again, strongly held belief. I think I'm made in God's image, and the stuff in this virus or this vaccine at the time was not proven. They also use embryonic stem cells, which I'm opposed to, especially now that I realize that. And I had a strongly held belief that God did not want me to take this shot. And so I filed for my religious exemption. The process was that we had to go talk to the same 3. We had to go talk to base legal. We had to talk to a chaplain, and we had to talk to a doctor. So it's a mass group of us. They break you down into individuals, and you go and talk to 3 different people. So at the time, I think we had to talk to the JAG that day. Anyways, it was just very brief that day. There wasn't a lot of threats that day. Then I go talk to the chaplain, literally breaking down. I broke down during this whole process for like 6 months, because it was just probably the hardest thing. It was one of the hardest things I ever had to do in my life. So I go talk to the chaplain, and he concurred that I had strongly held beliefs. Again, I think that God called me to probably separate at this time. I go to talk to the doctor next. So I had like a 10-minute conversation with the chaplain. It was a good conversation. Go to talk to the doctor, and he says, do you have any questions? You're here for a religious exemption. I kind of laughed. I smirked, and I said, yeah, do you have about 2 hours? Because I came with data. I came with a lot of data, paperwork, all that stuff, studies. So I started talking to him, and I started asking the hard questions like, where's the military getting their data from right now? And all I heard was FDA, CDC, things of that nature. And I started asking about, because at the time, I think Greenland or Iceland, I think it was Iceland, Britain, and a couple other countries had a lot more data than we did. And so I asked if they had looked at any of that data, especially Iceland. because I think Iceland at the time had the highest vaccination rates. And I was like, well, they've shown that there's actually no decrease in people catching it or the severity. So, where are you getting this data? I also quoted an AFI, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. I probably should have written it down for this episode. It was AFI 34, whatever. And essentially what the AFI says, and that's Air Force instruction for people that are not military, the AFI states that if you have natural serology, that means if you have had or if you've had a virus and you have natural T-bodies or immunity to it, then you don't have to get a shot. And so luckily, I forgot to mention, probably about 6 months before that, we had just got back from deployment and we had gone to Las Vegas. And we came back and my wife and I had both gotten sick. And she had gotten more sick than me, but I knew that I had COVID. And so I had after we got through that 2-week quarantine, and as this religious exemption stuff was popping off, I decided to go get a serology test or a T cell count, antibody count. And so I went and paid for it out of pocket, went to this clinic in Idaho, and they had given me the results that I did have T cells, which meant that I had a natural immunity to COVID. And so I took that data with me and I said, look, what happened to this AFI? It states that if I have natural serology to this or whatever, that if I have natural immunity, that I don't have to take it. And he said, well, essentially this is valid for every other virus or infection except for this one. And I was like, hold up. So my whole career, I've been told that I have to follow AFIs. And now you're telling me that because of this current situation that we no longer have to follow AFIs. Okay, that blew my mind. So I kept asking questions, and it was literally about an hour. And the doctor looks at me and he says, I thought you came here for a religious exemption. And I shook my head and I said, I thought you said I could ask questions. He said, we're done asking questions. We're done answering questions. I will sign off on your paperwork, but I thought you were here for a religious exemption. And it blew my mind again. And I was like, okay, that's cool. All right, we're done. So, that happened. From there, this is a long story. Sorry. I knew this was going to be long, but okay. From there, they started to have weekly Facebook chats with the wing commander. And so one day I go on there on my Facebook. I had just gotten off work and I go home and I started asking some hard hitting questions. What is the efficacy shown right now of people on base? Because I started to notice that most of the people that I work with, like I said, 80 or 90% of the base had already been vaccinated. So I started asking the questions. I started seeing that everyone was getting sick, a lot more than me. And I said, so I started asking these questions on Facebook chat. And I'm like, so what is the infection rate of people that have gotten the shot? Because I noticed that everybody was still getting sick. So that was like my third question. And essentially a doctor pops up in the background of this Facebook video and says, enough questions, we can't give that data out. And they literally shut down the Facebook chat. I mean, other people, there were like 10 questions deep already. And this was like the one that they were like, we can't give that data out. And I'm like, well, you're telling us that this is safe and effective, largely effective, but people are still getting sick. So that shut that down. Okay, some other things that started happening for a while. The people the unclean, the unvaccinated were essentially on base. We were the only ones that had to wear masks. So get your vaccine, you don't have to wear your face masks. Okay. That seems kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? This seems super hypocritical. This is almost like, I don't know. I can't think of the word. Harassment. I don't know. Unfair. And so I went and filed a complaint. I think the IG Base IG, which is Inspector General, told me that this wasn't a base thing. This was a DOD thing. So I filed a DOD IG complaint. That sat there for a month. I actually, after I filed it, I never got any feedback. I never got contacted or anything. So I just kept going. But to walk around with a mask when everyone else is like, I hated the masks. I still hate the masks. Like, I will not wear them again. I do not wear them. I think it's been shown to be ineffective. So, you got base of like 5,000 and you got a couple hundred people walking around with face masks still on. And it's like, okay, that's crazy, right? Like, this is how we're treated. Or we're unclean now. It's like the Scarlet Letter, right? Like, you're unclean. So that, at this point in time, I just really started getting pissed off. What's something else? So, if you got the vaccine and you got sick, then I think quarantine went down to like 5 days. But if you were in direct contact with someone, so I had a bunch of coworkers, and every time a coworker would get sick, then I had to go on quarantine for 2 weeks. Even if I wasn't sick, showing any signs, symptoms, they do the test, you're still getting quarantined for 2 weeks. So anyways, one day I'm on a mission with my commander, sitting face to face. We're on the mission. We're not wearing masks because we got to talk on the microphone. We're doing like air surveillance and stuff. And so, we're communicating. And then right after I get off the mission, one of my airmen comes and finds me. Someone comes and finds me or calls me. I think it's the front office. And they're like, you got to go home and quarantine for 2 weeks. And I was like, what? Like, I literally just got off a mission and I have a lot of work to do. I was at the time running the operations training shop. And so I had a lot of stuff to do. And I'm like, I was not a huge advocate of teleworking at the time. I just thought, like, I'm here. And a lot of stuff that we had to do there was like paper records. So we had an upcoming inspection and I wanted us to be ready. And so I go to my commander and I say, look, I was just on a mission with you. I'm clearly not sick. So this is kind of crazy. So he's like, yeah, this is pretty crazy. Clearly you're not sick. And so he calls up the clinic and says, hey, my guy said, apparently my staff sergeant had gotten sick and, it said that they had been in direct contact with me over the last week or something. I had seen her in like a week. So it's kind of late anyways, but calls up. Donnie hasn't been in direct contact with this person over a week. So why does he have to quarantine? Base protocol. Okay. I'm livid at this time. I'm like pissed. I'm like, look, I'm not sick. I got stuff to do. And, I don't think that I should have to, quarantine. And he said, Donnie, I get it. There's nothing he could do. There was nothing that he could do. So he said that, just go quarantine. Okay. Take your laptop and go home and work for 2 weeks. So I did that. I was pissed off. I grabbed my laptop, went home, teleworked for those 2 weeks. Some other stuff that started happening was each week that we would go in, we had to do a nasal swab just for people that weren't vaccinated. We had to do a weekly COVID test the first day we were in that week. So it was like Monday or Tuesday, you'd go in, take the swab. You had to do it yourself. And there were only like 10 of us at the time that would have to test, which again, to me is not fair. Especially since I wasn't showing any symptoms. I wasn't sick. It really starts to create like some sort of like Munchausen syndrome. I think that's what it is. What Munchausen by proxy. Starting to think that you're sick all the time. Like I didn't think I was sick. In fact, I just thought it was lunacy that this is something that we had came to. I just thought it was crazy. So around that time, my religious exemption had not left the base. There were probably at least 100 on base that were still fighting. And at that point in time, I had filed for a religious exemption for all vaccines because I just didn't see how every time I got the flu shot, every year I would get, a mild sickness. And I just, I guess I just became opposed to him at that point in time. So they kept doing the runaround as far as the religious exemption. They said, you need to go do this. Your documentation's wrong. You need to go refile it. You need to go talk to the doctor again. You need to do this. You need to do that. So they're just having us jump through hoops, and they ended up never leaving the base. So at this point in time, again, I'm just getting irritated. I go talk to my commander. I talk to my DO. I'm talking to my first sergeant. I'm just like, this shit's crazy. I've been in 12 years, and now I'm going to get kicked out because I'm not getting a shot, especially one that's not actually been tested and shown effective. And I had some, my chief and my first sergeant were really, really fighting for me. They were really trying to help me. They were like, Donnie, we don't want to lose you. You're awesome. You do a great job. We'll see what we can do. And at that point in time, I'm just mad. I'm so mad at life, at everything. Because I'd been in 12 years. I was almost 37. This was 33% of my life I'd spent as a military member. And now I'm going to get kicked out for this bullshit. And so, again, my chief and my first sergeant were trying to help me out, but there wasn't a whole lot they could do. During some of these conversations, I started breaking down crying. Like, I'm just like losing my shit. I'm like, I don't want to get out. Like, what am I going to do with my life? Luckily, I had, really focused on education while I was in and things of that nature. So I'd kind of set myself up, but I wasn't mentally prepared to get out. Not as rapidly as I did get out. Anyways, I'll probably get this 5 or 10 more minutes. But I wanted to be truthful in this podcast. So anyways, I go talk to my commander and my DO at the time, and I got some stuff, like, oh, I didn't want to take it either, but I had to take it, just to keep my career. And I was like, well, shit, that doesn't help me out. Like, that's your personal decision. So at the end of the day, I got some good feedback, at least as far as people trying to keep me, but at the same time, I didn't get the support that I needed. I really felt let down by my command. And so the Air Force did this little thing. This was crazy too. They gave a week where you could literally voluntarily separate, and then they would look at it and there's no penalty, and they would release you. Voluntary separation. So during that week, I'm talking to a lot of people, talking with my wife, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna stay and fight, because I didn't want to get out. That week's going by and all the bullshit's still coming. And so at the end of the week, I'm like, I gotta get out. Well, I just missed that week because I was convicted. I was like, I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna stay in. Anyways, after that week, I decided to apply. Well, it took 3 months to get denied due to retention in my career field. They said the numbers didn't work out and they needed me to stay in. And so, like, my mental health was severely declining. I was just angry all the time. I didn't want to be at work. I'd go into work, after quarantine or some shit, and I would just take a week of vacation. Luckily, I had stacked up for years. And then once that first one got denied, I was so agitated. That was December of 2021. I reapplied. And at the point in time, I was going to counseling for this. And like I said, it was just one of the hardest things that I ever had to do. And the day it got denied, I reapplied. And, luckily 2 months later, it finally got approved. And when it got approved, I put a date down that I needed to separate by, and that was the initial date that they said you needed to be out by. So when I reapplied, I was 4 months out from that date. When it got approved 2 months later, I was at 50 days from the date that I said I would separate. And so I had 41 days of vacation left, or terminal leave, and I had 9 days to out-process. So I took those 9 days, I out-processed very rapidly, and I separated from the Air Force after 12 and a half years because I didn't get the COVID VAX. And I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that say, that's stupid and this and that, and they got it. I've seen a lot of data out there about vaccine side effects, and I know from firsthand that I don't think the efficacy is great. And since I've gotten out, I've been a lot less sick. And so 3 years later, I'm doing very, very well. It took me a long time to get to the point that I'm at. And a lot of the reasons that I started doing this podcast, especially for veterans separating, is you don't know when your career is going to end. It could be from a medical situation. It could be from a family situation. It could be, retention, getting cut because of your job. It could be for whatever. You could get in trouble. But realize that your life does not end when your military career ends. In fact, in general, your military career ends around 20 years if you stay in that long. And then for some people longer, for a lot of people shorter. A lot of people don't stay in. But realize that it ends at some point in time, and then how you pick yourself back up. And a good place to start is with God to have your back. How you play after that and the steps that you take to move on and transition is harder than most people think, and especially in my situation. So I'll say after 3 years, I'm definitely glad I separated. At the time I wasn't, but I just want to say that for people that have been through this or, lost their civilian jobs or whatever, like, there are people like me, and there are actually people that stayed in and fought through the entire thing. There were people that didn't want to get the shot and got it to stay in. Well, I have a lot of friends that did that, and a lot of them wish they hadn't. And some people, it's their life choice that they thought it was the safe and effective and right thing to do. But that's my spiel, and that's why I separated from the military. But realize that, and this is one of the large reasons that I decided when I got out that I needed to create a YouTube channel, largely focused on military separation, but also just on self-growth, mindset, and self-development. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you literally hate this podcast or this YouTube video, then that's fine as well. But I hope you have a blessed day, and again, thanks for watching.